So hello everyone and welcome to our Hult's Virtual Skills Lab today. And this forum is an online global meeting space offering you the opportunity to skill up and get ahead, and this from home. So connect with us like-minded go-getters from all over the globe and hear from world-class Hult professors on the latest topics and trends live, from live interactive workshops and webinars. So for those of us who are joining Hult events for the first time, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background about us. So Hult has designed a school that looks into the future, focusing on developing your leadership skills, challenging you with a future-oriented curriculum, and building a global perspective that only first-hand experience can bring. We currently offer an undergraduate program, and also 5 specialized one-year master programs, a global one-year MBA, and a unique flexible part-time executive MBA. And more information on our programs and the upcoming scholarship deadlines and other deadlines that we're having, you can find them at hult.edu. So today we are joined by our Hult Professor Olaf Groth to explore the topic of Coronomics, resilience in the global pandemic economy. But before we are beginning, I would like a bit of housekeeping. Just as I see also a lot of people asking, for sure there will be a recording that will be sent out to everyone via email after the webinar, after a couple of days of this webinar today. And our Professor Olaf will do the masterclass today, which will last around 45 minutes. Plus Q&A at the end. And if you have questions, as mentioned before, at the bottom of this webinar, you can find a section for Q&A. So please post all the questions that you have during this webinar in there, which we will answer after the presentation, after the masterclass with Olaf. And finally, if you would like to learn more about our programs, we will be hosting webinars at the end for Masters, MBA, and EMBA, and I will share the links in the chat where you also texted right now how you can join these. So I would like now to hand over this webinar to our Professor Olaf Groth, and you can see him joining here already. I will stop sharing my screen and allow him to share his screen right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you here from Berkeley, California, right across the Bay Area, where we have our Hult International Business School San Francisco campus, a very sizable campus right in the heart of Silicon Valley and the hub of innovation here in the United States. Allow me to share my screen with you, and if you could just confirm that you are, in fact, seeing this. 1 second, there you go. And I'm going to launch this here now. Let's see, I think we have this flipped around. There you go. Stephen, can you just confirm that you're seeing this?
Yes, looks good. Perfect.
Looks good. Okay. Well, so again, thank you very much for joining us today. I am a professor of strategy, innovation, and economics. I teach some futures and foresight courses as well at Hult International Business School. I teach, as I said, from a home base in San Francisco, but I teach globally across all of Hult's campuses. So I'm frequently in New York and Boston and London, Dubai and Shanghai. And it's what makes Hult great, because we get to see and feel these very different populations, geographic areas, and bring all of that into the topics that we teach. Today's topic, Coronomics, resilient in the global pandemic economy, is a good example of that. So I came to Hult about 8 years ago, and I'm a practitioner. I'm a former executive, former consultant, and also former entrepreneur. Run my own think tank, Cambrian Futures. And so the content that you're seeing here is a collaboration. We bring together networks of experts in our research. And so what you're seeing here is a collaborative Hult project with a number of the professors that I enjoy working with. And so as such, a very good flavor of what we do in research as well as in our teaching. So let me dive right in, and then I will probably go for about 20, 25 minutes, and we'll maybe a little bit more, and we'll then open it up to Q&A, because a lot of the really good insights come, of course, in those interactions. And that's also a hallmark of my team. Lecturing is one thing, but but really exploration and synthesis of new insights and action paths and strategy is a contact sport, as I say. And so I'm very much interactive in my class design as well, and I would like to reflect that a little bit here as well. Okay, so needless to say, we are in a world of pain, right? The coronavirus crisis, or COVID-19 crisis, is hitting us all very hard. Needless to say, some people are hit harder than others, and that doesn't just pertain to, you know, the New York area in the United States. This also pertains in particular to other areas around the world that, you know, are starting to get hit very much now. You know, I'm thinking about countries like India, for instance, where there are a lot of socioeconomically less privileged parts of the population that have to migrate home and are now out of work and frankly do not have space to seek shelter and isolate themselves. And so we have to, as leaders, acknowledge the hardship. We have to acknowledge the hardship, both from a health standpoint, lots of people losing their health or relatives with bad health, but also people losing jobs. And that's very big. In the United States alone, we're looking at probably something around, you know, 12 to 14% unemployment. That is a dramatic increase from some of the lowest employment numbers that before the crisis that we've ever had. And so we have to acknowledge that there's lots of hardship to go around. That's what leaders do. Leaders don't skirt the issues. We acknowledge and empathize with the pain of others, but then of course we have to try to chart a path, right? Because that's what leaders do, and that's what we're trying to educate you at Hult to do. And so charting a path then means you think about what might, where you might want to go, even in this crisis and through the crisis, through the fog, into some future on the other side of the fog, because that's what people expect from you, right? We can't just sit on the couch and say, let's have this blow over, and then come out the other end and the sun will be shining. It won't be shining, not unless we all make it shine, right? And so you have to get people motivated to follow on a difficult path with you. How do you do that? Well, in order for people to be motivated and, you know, set their suffering, their momentary suffering aside, and the hardship and all that pain about disappointed expectations, you know, in their careers, in their jobs, in their businesses, even opportunities to travel, right? Or seemingly things like being on vacation, right, is going to get really tough this summer. All of those are feelings of loss, okay? And if you want them to overcome that, you're going to have to give them hope. How are you going to give the people around you hope? Well, you're going to have to reflect about what lies beyond the fog and why and how that is inspiring or at least worthwhile going after, okay? Because if people don't see that, they will not want to move. They will not follow you. They will not embark on that path, okay? So let's start with the first part. And, you know, as business leaders, you know, I'm going to take an economic point of view and go to this slide right here, which is an assessment that we have done. Very high level, very qualitative. It is not necessarily, you know, the result of a month-long macro or microeconomic study, but rather an assessment of a number of thought leaders that I'm working with. And what you see here is, on the bottom axis, the degree of short-term impact of the crisis, negative or positive. And on the left axis, you see long-term growth potential or promise, high or low. And when you're looking at these bubbles, they signify clusters of industries that are roughly positioned in similar ways on these two dimensions, okay? So when we're looking at automobile, for instance, we're not seeing high growth because we're seeing that we will not be able to manufacture cars at this rate in the foreseeable future. However, it's also not a bleak picture because automobile will transform into mobility at large that will be shared, and sharing platforms will continue to thrive here. Okay, and what we have is a very heavy impact right now, maybe 70–80% on automobile manufacturing. But as we are drifting into the future, then that will pick up again, aided by mobility services. So that's one example of an industry that's kind of stuck in the middle. Okay, when you're looking then to the left, let's say the very bright red circle here on the lower left, right? This is where the impact of the crisis is very negative, and the growth potential going forward is also equally low. And this is where, for instance, bricks and mortar retail businesses are that have been hurting thanks to digitization and large global internet platforms like Amazon. And they've been in transformation, digitizing themselves for a while. They're now getting hit really hard because people can't go to stores and buy things, right? Unless you're a mission critical business like food, and even then people can't really sit down in restaurants anymore. So then if you go over to the upper right-hand corner and you're looking at some of these green type colors, here we have, things like cybersecurity, video conferencing, online supermarkets, and then of course things like social media. They're all, by and large, are experiencing a positive impact of the crisis, net positive. I'm obviously here again, I have to disclaim it time and again, I'm overgeneralizing a bit. And we're also seeing massive long-term growth promise in these sectors. So what you're seeing is areas of the economy that are low promise and negative impact, lower left, high promise, positive impact, upper right. And so we're seeing a bifurcation of the of industries. Whatever these clusters are in terms of the headlines in between, we are seeing that this will lead to a massive economic disruption for some part of the economy on the negative side, and a massive disruption with upside on the part of some other businesses. Some of these trends have been there before. They're now getting accelerated and they're getting emphasized by this crisis for the reasons I just outlined. Okay, so that's a snapshot of what we're thinking is happening right now. Now, if you are a leader somewhere in the middle of this picture, or maybe on the bottom left, okay, then you're going to have to ask yourself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with my business? What am I going to do with my, maybe with my business unit, with my team? Or if you are, if you're still, reasonably young and junior in your role, you're looking at an MBA or at a graduate degree in a business school to develop your career, become more senior, then you're going to, of course, ask yourself, well, where am I going to have my career when you're looking at this picture, okay? Either way, if you're a young leader developing yourself, or a senior leader who is leading and actively managing small or large teams, you're going to have to now shift gears, okay? This is a call to action. This is a thought provocation from me to you to say, it's one thing to sit here as an academic looking at this picture. It's a whole nother thing to say, what are we going to do about this? And so I have developed this framework, and I call it Flip It, and FLP-IT. And I only call it that because I wanted it to be easy to remember for you, okay? Flip It consists of five steps. The first one is assessing forces. That's the F, forces, right? So what are the dominant forces that are emerging right now around the economy? some of which were there before and are now getting pushed and accelerated and amplified, and some of these are brand new, okay? Then you go to the L, logic, and you assess, once these forces collide, okay, or they combine and they mesh, then what is the new operating logic of the future that we might be seeing evolving behind the fog, okay? An operating logic means, what's the new dynamic? How are economic incentives set? How are people living their lives? What is the operating logic of that future? There are, of course, these dynamics in any society, in any economy, at any point in time. We had them before the crisis, but they're now changing after the crisis. We will not be going back to old patterns holistically. Things will materially change. So then what is changing? That's where you go to the P, phenomena and patterns. You have to now, based on the operating logic, right, that arose from the forces, you have to now look at the phenomena and the patterns that are showing themselves in society, in the economy, okay? So it's almost like, you know, from the operating logic will bubble up new types of themes, new types of patterns that will become apparent of how things work, okay? And that's, of course, then very well suited to take you to impact, to assess an impact. Once you understand the phenomena, the patterns in society, now you can say, what's the impact of that on me, in my business, in my career, in my community system, okay? And then after that, you say, now I know what the impact is. Could be positive, could be negative, right? Could be up, could be down, okay? Then you say, I have to now look at my opportunities and triage them. This is the T and flip it, okay? So triaging means you thought you had XYZ opportunity in the past or in the moment, even today, okay? And you see that rapidly changing, which is nothing different from just saying some of those opportunities, if you were to describe them, whether they're internships or jobs or maybe deals you're working on, they will be staying the same. They may no longer look as good as they did, but you can probably recover them. Then there'll be others that will be going away. They're dead, they're killed, and they will not come back, okay? And then there's yet others that will remain unchanged. Once you assess that, you need to then look forward and say, there's a new set of opportunities that are bubbling up from these phenomena, from this operating logic that we have now seen as we assess impact, that we also need to assess. And then we have to triage between the new set of opportunity and the old set of opportunity. Because while we all may mourn the opportunity lost, okay, and we all may be disappointed, leaders don't just sit there and accept that. Leaders then say, what part of this do I have to de-emphasize, and what part of this over here that's new do I emphasize going forward, okay? So that is the Flip It framework's 5 steps to resilience, okay? Exercising future foresight in order to motivate people to go on a path with you and to follow you, as it were. And, you know, that could be as simple as your friends and family. That could be, you know, maybe as your leading employers that you want to have a job with, sort of, you know, impressing them by saying, I think this is how I think about the future. But either way, you're leading a group of people, you're leading a conversation, okay? You're leading us or something into a set of opportunities, okay? Okay, now let's start with the forces, okay? So there are many, many forces that are now bubbling up, and some of these, as I said, were here before. Some of these you will recognize as new, right? So there are those that are scientific or technological in future. The mortality rate of the virus, the time to us finding a vaccine and producing and distributing it at scale. Then there is solidarity in communities. So now we're drifting from the science into social, okay? Social domains. So the solidarity in communities. Go to the right, the capacity of societal institutions, political, economic, social institutions, environmental institutions. What's their capacity for helping us out here, for taking action, for making policies, for convening us, for leading us, okay, and coordinating that. Degree of coordination between countries. This is really important. The virus doesn't know any borders. So we have to make sure that our institutions coordinate across borders. We're seeing some of that in Europe, of course. We're seeing some of that on the US West Coast, where the governors of Washington and Oregon and California are talking about, how they should coordinate when to release people back into societal life and end quarantines and lockdowns, under what conditions, with what kind of safeguards, right? That's really important that we coordinate between regions and countries. Impact of lockdowns on the economy, impact of stimulus and rescue packages. So the damage that the lockdown will do, and then the efficacy, the effectiveness of the packages that governments are now trying to tie up for us to help us out. The rate of innovation by startups, really important, right? Because startups are change agents in society. They help us adapt to new conditions. They disrupt, of course, they disrupt older industries. They ensure that we renew ourselves. As such, they play a very important role in society. We at Hult are very much focused on helping educate entrepreneurial talent, not just for startups, but also entrepreneurial skill sets for corporations. Very much in demand right now. So what's the rate of innovation by startups and by entrepreneurs? Very big question right now. The rate of adoption of new virtual and hybrid business models, new ways of working. What's the balance going to be of physical and of digital, right? Very big question there as well. Affordability of tech solutions for pinch points, right? So just because we can design tech solutions, take us forward, maybe hybridize or virtualize our day, doesn't mean everybody can afford that. There are lots of people around the world who can't be on Zoom, who can't be on Microsoft Teams, who can't be on Skype because they don't have the financial or technological means to be. I can also tell you examples in the United States. Some students in public schools are not able to get teaching on Zoom, whereas students in private schools have the funds and the technological wherewithal to be educated virtually and digitally, right? So, so clearly, affordability and the social disparities, economic disparities, will have an impact on the quality of the labor force, on who goes to college or gets the next best job, okay, and on income situations in society. So now, as we examine this closer and mesh some of these, okay, here are 4 future logics, right? So remember, we were in forces, okay, now that's the F, now we're in logics, and that's the L. What's the future logic that could be emerging? And I have crafted, just to provoke you thinking, I have crafted 4 scenarios on how the operating logic of the future could evolve. Now, I want to pause here and just say, I teach futures thinking, foresight, and scenario planning. Scenarios like this are not about prediction. They're not prediction. They're not really even forecasting. Prediction and forecasting are usually point to point. I'm here in 2020, I think I can predict a data point, a specific instance, a specific development in 2025 or 2030. Scenarios like this are not forecasts and predictions, they are foresight. And foresight means that we want to understand the realm of that which is plausible, which could be happening. And then we want to prepare for the eventuality of falling somewhere in between these different bookends, these extreme states. Because we can rest assured that if we have bookends and extremes, and we prepare for them, if we fall somewhere in between, we are resilient, we are robust, okay? So the first one here, first cornerstone, is what I've called the medieval mess, okay? Medieval mess because, as you can see here in this quadrant in the upper left, we have disparate and incoherent adaptive capacity of our institutions. They're not coordinating, they don't have the right programs, they're failing, as it were, okay? Then we have, on the other axis, the impact of stimulus and rescue packages by governments. And so here we are engorging pockets of already existing wealth with our economic packages. So you have lack of coordination, disparate policies and approaches, and you have lots of money going to people who already had it before the crisis, okay? This is a world in which medieval mess, where you have a lot of toggling back and forth of governments letting people out free into society, then calling them back in and into more lockdowns, because the virus will keep coming with waves as it eats itself through society and creates immunity in society. It will be a long, drawn-out process, and equally then, because we don't get money to the right people and the right means, we will also see widespread unemployment and rising poverty. So it's what we call a prolonged W-shaped recovery, right? It's going up, it's going down, it's going up, it's going down multiple times. It'll take 2 years, if not longer, to recover. Now go over to the right. This is what I've called technocracy's triumph. This is where we do have disparate and incoherent adaptive capacity of social institutions, but some, of course, some countries are doing better than others. I'm thinking about countries in Asia, for instance, South Korea, very successful fighting a very heavy outbreak. Japan not doing badly. Singapore, Taiwan, even Vietnam, but also, China, of course, after making many mistakes, now having clamped down and been very effective at getting over the crisis. So there are other technocracies that are doing quite well. In Europe, for instance, Germany is doing well. Some of the Scandinavian countries are doing well. Technocracies are political systems that can be found anywhere in the world that are led by solid, well-educated, well-trained, well-incentivized, technocratic talent in their bureaucracies, okay? So in this world, we will see certain countries drifting away from others, and they will be doing very well. We will see a U-shaped recovery, which means a little bit longer at the bottom, but not a W, flip-flopping back and forth. Now let's go to the third archetype, the lower left. Frugal feudalism. What does that mean? This is a world in which we are very coherent in and coordinated in what we do on the virus front, and we are not getting the right economic means, the right money to the right people for the right purposes. So this is a world in which we will have stability, but it's at a very low economic set point. And it will take us a long time to come out of it, because the money has gone to what we have called a new set of oligarchies across major economies around the world. And that means that the population will be kept down in terms of economic, socioeconomic status and development. And we will see a long bathtub-shaped recovery, okay? Then, of course, we go over to the right, and we see that we are, in fact, getting money into the right pockets for the right purposes and the right amount of money. And we are also globally coordinated and coherent in our approaches. And that is what we call Renaissance Reloaded, okay? This is where we get over the virus very quickly because we coordinate across borders. We do the right things on the virus front, but we also do the right things on the economic front. We stimulate demand, people's livelihoods, we keep them employed, okay? We will recover fairly quickly there. And that also then means that we have lots of good money going to entrepreneurial talent, helping us adapt. That leads to better innovation and higher levels of growth, and it'll be a V-shaped recovery, okay? Fairly quick, okay? So now what strikes you here, of course, is that the Renaissance Reloaded is like a utopia, bright and shiny and optimistic. Medieval mess is of course, dystopian, meaning dark and not very attractive. And that's very typical with these bookend type scenarios. And you have a few others that are kind of in between, okay? And the idea here is, again, I can't emphasize this enough. Imagine a world in which you have to be prepared for all of these, okay? Because these are the plausible outcomes that lie behind the fog. And this is the beautiful element of how we teach foresight, because now you can go to the phenomena and patterns that are arising across the scenarios, okay? Pretend what I just showed you are extremes in different parts of the world of the same future. What are the regular phenomena and patterns that will evolve, that will bubble up from the operating logics that I just walked you through? Well, the first pattern is we will see a lot of after tremors. In something like frugal feudalism, there'll be small tremors because we have relative stability. In Renaissance Reloaded, they'll be quick and then they'll stop. In medieval mess, there'll be tectonic shifts that will keep coming, and they'll, the different trends will keep rubbing off on each other, and we'll have lots of friction. Okay, and in technocracy's triumph, we will see that after tremors will be much bigger in some countries that don't have proficient technocracies, and much more easily managed and even out in the others that do have them. So that's just an example. The other trends will be, we will see a wave of roll-ups. Roll-ups is a business term that means M&A. Healthy businesses, larger businesses, those that have a lot of cash stacked away, will start to buy up lots of smaller businesses that are going out of business now, okay? Decentralization of supply chains means we have really understood now that we have economically very fine-tuned supply chains around the world, but specifically, of course, with China. A colleague of mine said the other day, we didn't truly have globalized supply chains. We had global sourcing of stuff in China. And so we had a China supply chain. Well, that's not quite true, but we did have an overweighting of the supply chain in China. So now we've learned the lesson that we need to be resilient and we need to decentralize supply chains. How do you do that economically with the same degree of efficiency? Which gets me to point number 7 down below that says we're going to see global platforms get strengthened and solidified, okay? So we will see them becoming powerful. The Alibabas of this world, the Amazons of this world, the SAP Aribas of this world, because they will help us with smart switching at the center of the platform, lots of AI, big compute power, lots of data, and they will help us switch. When China goes down, then maybe Germany will pick up, or maybe it's India or Vietnam, okay? And it's at the drop of a hat. We will see hybridized work solutions. We will see a jump in automation. We will see much more push for real-time data, on health surveillance, on economic surveillance. And my big concern on that one is that we don't have enough protective legislation and safeguards to warrant privacy and transparency, but we can talk about that offline. Okay, the last one here is localism versus virtualism. What do I mean by that? We sort of have a false dichotomy between, are we becoming more global or are we going more local? It turns out that even though we have certain political powers to be in a lot of different places around the world that are saying we need to isolate, we need to just focus on the nation state. But meanwhile, economically and business-wise, we're still seeing a strengthening of global flows. So my opinion is that we will see, because of this virus, we will see localism and virtualism increasing, but in particular ways. We will see us going much more locally physical and much more globally virtual, meaning the platforms, the electronic means of communicating and collaborating will drive us to doing more globally, but in virtual ways. And we will be more physical, very locally bound, okay? So now that we have taken a look at phenomena, how do we assess impact? The impact assessment is done in 2 ways. I'm going to just sort of fly over this real quick. What you see here is a system diagram on a socioeconomic system like healthcare or transportation or education, okay? And here, what's important is that when you look at these loops of how different systems balance each other, like how different institutions, companies, universities, hospitals in any given domain are interacting with each other, we're now seeing breakage points in some of these flows. We need to assess for our domain, where in, let's say, if you're a car company, where in the domain system of mobility, because this is much more than an industry. It's industry plus stakeholders. Where are things breaking down? If people cannot be close to each other inside a car anymore, let's say you're in medieval mess, okay, then what is the mode of transportation that still allows me to sell a car or to sell a mobility solution? See, right here, what becomes clear is that the breakage and the weak points in these systems will determine directly what your product design should be like, okay? Equally, let's look at value chains. This is an example value chain for fashion. And right here, what you need to do for your particular business or for your particular career, if you're looking to get, let's say, into fashion, draw out a value chain and analyze where is the value chain breaking, becoming weaker, or maybe stronger. So here we're seeing that raw material sourcing will probably take a hit because raw material sourcing is very labor intensive usually, and people can no longer be close together or they have gone home, okay? But design could be up because we have more virtual digital means of design. Manufacturing could go up because we have more automation. Distribution could be down because that again is people and big distribution centers. And here, of course, also would then need to bring automation to bear. Stores, retail establishments are clearly down as we discussed. So my meaning here is you need to understand where are you in these value chains? Are you up? Are you down? If you're a business owner and you're making stuff like fashion, then you need to ask yourself, you know, if I am at the very end of this, who in my value chain is up or down? Because I now need to negotiate with them very differently. I may need to help them, or I may need to accept that they're going out of business and substitute them. Or maybe I should invest in order to innovate my way around certain parts of this value chain, okay? Which gets me to the final part, the T, before I close out. There is lots of opportunity triaging now between what the value chain looked like before the crisis and what it can look like beyond the crisis. So what were the opportunities before that you have to let go, free up cash, in order to look at the new opportunities in that value chain or in that societal system that you can spend money against, innovate, have solutions, maybe be an entrepreneur or an innovation or product development executive, and then say, I can do something here to make this value chain whole, to improve it, maybe even make it better than it ever has been. Here, I'm just, sector by sector, I'm just giving you I'm popping out some opportunities like remote fab or lab operations or manufacturing operations, right? Public health surveillance, what can we do there? New players offering executive education that is more immersive than it was before, right? People want to be in a room together, be physically close, and yet the virus and maybe economic situations won't allow that. Well, how do you immerse people to continue to develop their skills? Increased supply chain redundancy and agility, we talked about this. Home privacy and work-life management solutions, that one is obvious, but also new finance solutions. Like think about fintech and how fintech could help all of these poor souls around the world who now are hurting because their jobs have gone away, or because they've gotten sick, or they need to care for somebody who's gotten sick in their families. How can we help them with new sort of bottom of the pyramid frugal fintech solutions to get back on their feet? Get back on their feet they must, because if they don't, they cannot be active participants in the economy, and that means they won't have a voice, and that also means the economy won't get restarted, because we need a good, healthy, big pool of consumers, middle class in particular, to pull us out of the slump on the demand side. So with that said, allow me to pause here and take your questions. I thank you for your attention. Hopefully this was inspiring and thought-provoking, agree or disagree, but that's the value of a higher education, is of course to things to rub off on them and to say, what can I learn from this and where do I want to explore further? Okay. So with that, back over to you, Steve.
Okay. Thank you, Olaf. I will do my best to go all over the questions that we already have. And like I said before, down below in your screen, you can see a Q&A section where you can put your questions, and I will do my best. But please apologize already. We probably won't be able to answer everything. So I took some notes also over all of the questions. So many questions go over sustainability and the social impact that this crisis will have, and the social responsibility companies will have. Can you give us some insights on how companies can kind of mitigate in this situation?
Yes, I'd be more than happy to, and I'm going to try and show my face here because you've seen the slides plenty. That is a great question, Stephen. Thank you, and whoever asked it, or whoever the multiple people are asking it, and I see that there were some 85 comments in the chat as well. This is a very big concern of mine, because we are doing two things that are potentially harmful to society, but also to nature, to Earth. Okay, and the first one is that we will see a widening of social inequality. It is very clear that some people do not have the right means, do not have the right resources. They don't have any financial buffers. They don't have laptops. They have, some people walk to work for hours. They simply do not have the means to become more resilient and to educate themselves or be productive in virtual or digital ways. So we will, especially in developing countries, see a big hit there, but also in the United States and elsewhere. So the scissors will open in terms of inequality, and this is where government really needs to step in and help these parts of the population, because without them we cannot restart the economy. There is no economy that is just made for the privileged. We need everybody to have prosperity, so then once they have that, they can spend money, and that's how we innovate and design new products and sell new products. The economy can't work if there's too much poverty, and of course it's morally, ethically objectionable to begin with. On the environmental front, we are of course seeing some positive developments now, because people are no longer on airplanes and they're not in their cars driving to work, and factories and office towers are essentially empty in many parts around the world, and so that has a net positive impact on emissions, on energy consumption, and the like. And I think we are also now dedicating resources to economic stimulus and to recovery funds, I should say, because we first have to recover before we can stimulate. That was previously going to climate change mitigation, adaptation solutions, and really toward ecological sustainability. That is a mistake, I believe, and I understand that policymakers have to balance very carefully, and there's only so much money to go around. We're spending a collective, $8 trillion on these recovery plans. So yes, first things first, but let's not forget that we need to take care of Earth for humanity's sake, if nothing else, because this crisis was in part, of course, made possible by the fact that we are going into parts of nature, remote locations where organisms that are then interacting with us and our cattle and livestock in ways that are completely novel and unexplored to us. So we cannot lose sight of the fact that ecology does play a role in this crisis and also in the economy overall. Okay, thank you.
So I try to follow up with everything. So one big area that I can see also for the questions is in talking about the recession that we are currently experiencing. Is it global, the impact of the debt that we had in the world, and is this increasing right now? And also, how will a recovery in this world will look like? And are there any tools that we could apply to this?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously the big question, right? And in some ways, the easy way out is if everybody were to, take some foresight and do what we're doing here, or what we're teaching you at Hult, then the world would be better off, because we're all seeing eye to eye on some of these choices. I'm afraid that and this is part of my purpose of offering these webinars around the world, to hopefully play a small part in enabling that. And of course, I'm not alone doing that, because what I'm seeing out there is maybe not because of ill will, but because of lack of capacity, that we are not yet coordinating enough. So we are seeing certain economies that will rebound much faster, that will be doing much better, they'll be pulling ahead of others, and that the recovery for some countries, some very notable countries in Europe, I'm thinking about Italy, for instance, but also Spain, is going to take longer, and so that's going to create more of a scissor shape, and for the economy overall, maybe more of a W or bathtub-shaped recovery than a V or U-shaped recovery, which tends to be quicker in the economy. So that is a concern of mine. I think there are valiant efforts right now on the behalf of the United Nations, the OECD, certainly the European Union, in order to coordinate better, but we are not seeing nearly as much cooperation as we should. Instead of the United States and China cooperating, roping in the WTO and the WHO, or collaborating at the Asia Infrastructure Development Bank, right together, they're still apart and they're pointing fingers and shouting at each other across the Pacific, which is really not very helpful. It may suit their political purposes, but I guarantee you it will backfire. And so that is a big concern of mine. And the more people like you we have out there as globalists, globally minded, but locally active and responsible, the better it is, which is what makes my job fun and meaningful. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Very, very nice. And one last bigger question. So I tried to bundle everything together, and I see really, really nice kind of question bundle here from somebody anonymous, unfortunately. But the question is, how can distribution be reduced? Is not the contrary in this situation? If the stores will decrease, how will be the contact between the consumers and products look like after this crisis? And with that, do we see changes in supply chains and also relationships, for instance, with Asia or China?
Yeah, so again, good question. Sort of leveraging off the presentation, I definitely agree that we will see an increase in distribution through global digital platforms. So Amazon's orders have gone up, and for all the right reasons, and we're grateful for that. And I haven't analyzed Baidu, Alibaba, and the others yet, but I would suspect that the data will say the same thing. Now imagine though you are a retail store distributing clothing, like what I showed earlier, or you're in a bricks and mortar business like bakeries or perishables. There, of course, if it is something that is carved out right now, so groceries may not be the best example because that's mission critical for communities and stores are open. But if it's anything else that is very physical, that needs to get distributed through physical stores or physical contact, then that distribution will be going down. And many businesses that are analog or bricks and mortar businesses that are relying on that distribution are not well equipped to negotiate with an Amazon or an Alibaba or an SAP Ariba because they don't have the skill set. These are not digitally native and they don't have data scientists. And so in this new world, of course, what becomes eminently important is to have young people like you with strategic business knowledge, with innovation knowledge, with data science and artificial intelligence knowledge, which is what we're training on at Hult, to go into these businesses and help them connect to these global platforms, connect and distribute through the global platforms, but also as you do that, negotiate a good deal. Because otherwise, and this is the fallacy with global platforms, you will be squeezed on the margins, you don't have pricing control, and that will not be good for your business. So being able to have the right talent and the right skill set to negotiate will be fundamentally important, okay?
All right. Thank you so much for this webinar, Olaf. And this was really, really insightful. And I learned a lot. I hope everyone that joined this webinar learned as much as I did. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining. As I said before, we will share a recording of this webinar with you a couple of days after we are finishing up here. So if you felt this was really insightful, we have a number of webinars coming up. The next would be on Friday with Professor Amit. He's discussing the topic leading in a digital world. So please go to our webpage, hult.edu/virtual skills and register there. And